Well, let's go back to the question, which is, what is school for? Why are we even spending trillions of dollars to do this? If all we're trying to do is indoctrinate people, all we're trying to do is get them to do what's on the test, well, then basically we should switch to artificial intelligence and let computers do it.
Today, I'm diving into a topic that has consumed our social media feeds lately, and that is AI. With the rise of AI tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, Cactus, Writesonic, and so many others, it's got everyone once again asking, what is the purpose of school in today's world? To reflect on this topic today, I'm going to be sharing excerpts from my interview with Seth Godin from the documentary that I created last year, Designing Schools, The Future is a Place We Create. For those who may not know Seth, he's a best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and a teacher at heart who believes in making a difference. So let's dive in and explore the skills and mindsets that today's learners need to thrive in their world where we have both humans and machines. How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools. The question about the purpose of school has been a topic of debate for centuries. In the past, educators saw themselves as philosophers and mentors. They focused on fostering students' thinking and understanding and preparing them to be lifelong learners and active members of their communities. These are things that we still hear people say. However, with the rise of industrialization, the focus shifted to preparing students for the workforce and instilling obedience. This led to an education system that valued efficiency over effectiveness, conformity over creativity, and rote memorization over critical thinking. These industrial age environments can be detrimental to both students and educators. Personally, as an enthusiastic, creative, and passionate educator, just 3 years after graduating in 2007, I found the bureaucracy of the public education system to be so draining that I was ready to quit and go and find another career. However, reading Linchpin by Seth Godin really changed my perspective, and it helped me to see the potential of what it meant to be a linchpin in the education system so that I could make a real impact. Because after all, if you're in education, that is why you are here. So I'm excited to share my interview today with you with Seth Godin about what it means to be a linchpin. And if that word is new to you, as it was to me, let's go ahead and get started with what it means to be a linchpin.
So the word linchpin comes from the old Wild West, and wagons have 4 wheels and wooden axles, and the thing that holds the wheel on is a little tiny piece of metal called a linchpin. And if that little tiny piece of metal breaks, the whole wagon stops working. And we have built an industrial economy designed to eliminate, whenever we can, linchpins, to train kids to become cogs in the system. The reason org charts have square boxes on them is because if you leave, we can find someone else to take your spot. And I believe that humans and our culture are best served when human beings become something bigger than that. Something individual, something special, somebody we would miss if they were gone. It doesn't mean that anyone is indispensable. They're not. When we're gone, the planet will still be here. But it means that seeking to lean into those edges is worth something.
2 decades later, I can't remember how I came across the book, but the lessons I learned and the transformation that it brought to my career as an educator were so significant that here I am, and instead of reading Seth Godin, I'm interviewing him and creating what he would call art. Again, another word that was not new to me because we all have our own definition of art, but here is what Seth Godin means when he says it's important for us to create art.
And to answer your second question, I think that art has nothing to do with painting. It is what we call it when a human being does something that's never been done before, something generous, and something that might not work. And we let kids do that when they're 7, but somewhere along the way, we try to persuade them that they don't have any talent and we make them stop.
We're all artists, but sometimes we lose touch with what that means. One of my favorite books from last year was Atomic Habits by James Clear, where he emphasized the importance of shifting from outcome-based goals to identity-based goals. When we do so, he says, we're more likely to succeed. The key, though, to making that shift is going back to the question, who do you want to be? What do you want your art to be? When I think about that question, I want to be someone who balances optimism with evidence when designing schools. Last year, I released the documentary Designing Schools, The Future is a Place We Create, where I shared the story of Design 39 and how they were able to create, sustain, and measure the impact of their innovative collaborative teacher model, all within a public school. I remember visiting Design 39 for the first time when I was teaching and thinking, why is this the exception and not the norm? This documentary is my art and my contribution to a shared vision for designing schools. And so I was honored when Seth Godin agreed to be a part of it, because after all, it was his book that kept me in the profession and really was the inspiration for everything that I've done so far. Here's an excerpt from the documentary where Seth shares his vision for what school is for.
Well, let's go back to the question, which is, what is school for? Like, why are we even spending trillions of dollars to do this? If all we're trying to do is indoctrinate people, all we're trying to do is get them to do what's on the test, well, then basically we should switch to artificial intelligence and let computers do it. We don't need to memorize anything if we can look it up with 6 clicks. The alternative is to realize that what school is for is to teach kids to be leaders, to solve interesting problems, to lean into problems. And we can't do that from a rigid curriculum because no 2 kids are the same. The only way we can do that is with a human being on site who will create the conditions for them to learn. So that doesn't mean lectures. I don't think most teachers should be lecturing. I think that we should get best-in-class lectures and have kids watch them at night. I think that a great teacher, the reason you sign up to be a teacher in the first place is so you can see a student, really see them, and show up in the right moment with the right intervention to make a change happen.
Design thinking is a powerful tool for creating change in schools. Why? Because it begins with empathy, and it encourages people to come together and ask questions that start with optimism by using the sentence starter, how might we? So for example, you might ask, how might we create a more collaborative culture for educators? How might we shift from traditional instruction to project-based learning? Ultimately, it helps us turn challenges into opportunities. It's also important to remember that when using design thinking, you don't come to the table with solutions and answers. The design thinking method provides a series of frameworks that structure and scaffold the steps that you need to address whatever challenge or opportunity it is that you're looking at. In addition, it also enhances your mindset and empowers everyone to be comfortable with ambiguity. It raises your creative confidence, it helps you build stronger empathy skills, but ultimately it helps you ask better questions and see things that other people may have missed. This is what will ultimately make you the linchpin in your organization. By using design thinking, educators can create learning experiences that are relevant for today's learners. They place the educator back in their authentic role as a learning experience designer. Using design thinking, you can also transition from an isolated to a collaborative culture. Collaboration is essential for accelerating innovation, and design thinking provides an understanding of team strengths and structure so that you can keep things organized and that progress can be made towards your goals. This transition is so vital in today's ever-changing world, and it's really important that we give people the tools and resources to be able to adapt and innovate within their classrooms. I asked Seth to elaborate on this and why he believes the transition from isolation to collaboration is essential for schools if they're going to be successful in the future.
If we think about being good at school, what jobs for the next 100 years of that kid's life are available for someone who is good at school? I have trouble thinking of any. Not surgeons, not receptionists, not people who are chief financial officers or accountants, not bus drivers. None of those jobs are based on, are you good at school? Good at school means you paid attention to the assignment and you did well on the test. But there are no tests. There are no number two pencils at work. So why are we using this method? Well, we used the method because in the 1920s and 40s, it was the best available way to do the indoctrination we sought to do. But it isn't useful anymore. And what is useful is teaching resilience and connection and the ability to ask hard questions and initiative and all these things that some people call soft skills, because that's actually what we need.
The skills that he mentions are not new to the conversations that we have about reform. In the documentary, I also share the learning outcomes from the research I did at Design 39. When using design thinking, over 90% of educators agreed that design thinking increases skills like learning from failure, collaboration, creativity, communication, and problem finding in both themselves and their students. Seth Godin is famous for saying that we need to create more of a ruckus. Doing this, he says, is the act of making things better by making better things. It's the hard work, he says, of showing up with insight, assertions, and kindness. And it's the opportunity to shine a light and open a door and lead. It's time we all make a ruckus in schools. So I asked Seth what he would say to teachers who are ready to take those actions.
Well, the thing I would say to teachers is, please don't get confused about the difference between authority and responsibility. They're not giving you enough authority. And the system is based on authority, principals and assistant principals, all the way down to the teacher who gets told what to do. You're not going to solve this problem by getting more authority. But responsibility, it turns out they hand that out like candy. And if you are willing to take responsibility, you can subvert the system in a good way by showing up despite what the people in authority say to bring your full self to work, to do this emotional labor. And that choice is exhausting. You're not paid enough to do that, but that's what you signed up for. So what I'm begging teachers to do is go back to the thing that you are great at, which is not following instructions and administering tests. It's actually being a teacher.
When I created the documentary, one of my goals was to spark conversations about why we need to give teachers more autonomy in their work. Too often, people want to tell teachers and school leaders what to do. ChatGPT is a great example. Every day you see articles about the top 5 ways to use this tool and how things are going to become irrelevant if you don't. And while these are incredibly helpful sometimes and give us great inspiration, ideas, and examples, what we really need to do first is give people the time and space to assess existing and emerging technologies and their role within their own environments and contexts. Questions like, what do you wish you had more time for? What barriers prevent you from pursuing opportunities for yourself and your learners? What should you be doing and what should machines be doing? When we begin with these questions, everyone becomes more confident and excited about the possibilities for what they can create and existing and emerging technologies that will allow them to do things they previously may not have been able to do. Earlier, I shared that one way to do this and to have these conversations is by using design thinking. It really allows teachers to assess new technologies and figure out what works best for them and their learners. However, educators also need the support of their principals. Research shows that principal leadership is key to making changes in schools. And by giving teachers time to reflect on their role in education, we can empower everyone to use technology in the most effective way possible. I asked Seth what advice he would give to teachers and school leaders who are looking to take back their authority and make the most of new technologies.
So it's not easy to be a principal either, because you are reporting to a board, which is reporting to untutored taxpayers. And you may have defaulted to, how do I get 100% compliance? How do I exercise my authority so no one here will ever surprise me? Because if I can build a school with no surprises, my bosses, the superintendent, will never be disappointed. But now you're a factory foreman. Why did you don't want to be a factory foreman. You can do better than that. And so part of it is challenging the teachers who work for you to never settle for whatever is on the status quo. That the people who should be getting in trouble in your office are the teachers who did nothing that failed, who did nothing that was surprising, who did nothing outside their curriculum. That should be failure. Everybody else, the ones we should be celebrating and rewarding, are the teachers who showed up to teach. And that might mean not coloring inside of all the lines, but that is what school is actually for. And if you don't think that's what school is for, if you think school is a bureaucratic institution designed to generate people who win soccer trophies and do well on tests, then say it and stop hiring teachers and start systematizing everything.
From not seeing the connection between what they are learning in school and their future careers or interests, to not finding the teaching methods or curriculum engaging or challenging enough, students are equally frustrated by outdated schools and their outdated expectations. Above all, we hear from students that the school environment is not always inclusive or accommodating to their unique needs and identities. This, again, is what makes using the design thinking approach so unique. Because design thinking begins with empathy, the steps that you take are grounded in the needs, the interests, and strengths of your learners. If you're interested in trying this approach, you'll find a link to resources in the show notes. They're completely free, and I'm excited for you to try them. I asked Seth to close with sharing what message he would give to today's learners who are often finding themselves frustrated in an outdated model of school.
I would say your job as a student is not to please the superintendent or the principal or the administrative teacher. Your job as a student is to find a way forward for a world that they're unprepared for a world that is warming, for a world that is going to be dealing with one pandemic after another, for a world that is in disarray. And you don't get measured on how many A's you have. And the purpose of school is not to get into a famous college. And the purpose of a famous college is not to go to fraternity parties. Why are you even here? And if your only answer is because your parents told you you had to, I would challenge you to do better than that. Ask hard questions. Ask, what is this for? Don't ask, will this be on the test?
None of this work is easy. Community and collaboration are essential when designing schools. The documentary is just one example of a campus that chose to do school differently. Jane McGonigal, in her book Imaginable, calls these examples signals of hope. And she says the more we learn about different examples, the more confident we become in what's possible. The documentary is available online at designingschools.org, and I have a link for you in the show notes. If you're interested in bringing a design thinking workshop experience to your campus, you'll also find my contact information in the show notes, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you about what's possible for you and your community when you begin using design thinking. It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.